tried to watch the very first video for week 14. It's the um, correlation, understanding correlation video that I couldn't get to play. And I tried a couple of browsers, but it seemed to not be working. I don't know if it was just me, but I couldn't get it to work yet. And I know Jessica normally works ahead, so I'd asked her if she got it to work, but she hasn't tried it yet. So I'm not sure if it's just me or not.
I will double check, because I know despite the fact that I thought we had them all fixed, there have been a few that we had to fool with some more. So I will check as soon as we're done tonight.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Week 14, right?
Yeah, it's the very first video. I've been able to watch the other ones. I'm pretty sure all of them loaded without problem. It was just the first one.
I'm sure it's something with the format again then. So I'll take a look.
Great. And then I can start talking about the paper if you would like.
Yeah, let me share the screen so we've got the rubric.
That'd be great.
And, oops, where did it go? There. So, go fire away. What questions do you have?
I think the only part that I've pretty much finished the paper itself, but what I'm most keep going back to is the methods section. And definitely part of that is that it's 10 points out of 10 total. But also part of it is because I keep thinking about, like, if I know what my data is and I already have it in front of me, then I could do like a scatter plot and I could look at patterns that are existing. Like, it's hard to kind of speculate about what the data will end up clustering and showing. So it's been hard for me to write it in this, like, I think it might be this type of wording, instead of saying, we did an analysis, this is why we chose to do it, and this is how we came to that conclusion. Like, I've only written papers after I've chosen my analysis. I haven't written grants where you talk about what you're going to be doing. So that wording has been hard for me.
Yeah, so maybe it'll help to think about this as, remember in the beginning where we said your question and your methods. So what the question is, what I think the problem is caused by, or the theory of the problem, and the intervention is going to address that problem. And then how am I going to measure that intervention address that problem? So I'm going to be looking for, have you selected the right population to test? Have you selected the right intervention based on what you know?
It has to be an intervention?
Well, no.
Because I've done observational is what my study design has been. Okay, because I thought, like, crap, I haven't done it like an interventional thing at all. I really did a quasi-experimental.
That's fine. That's totally fine. Okay. And then are your measures, whatever you're going to be observing, are they going to measure or give you information about what you're interested in? And then how do you know that they're reliable and valid to give you the information that you're interested in? And then your procedures are, how are you going to go about collecting that data in the most reliable and valid way without having, some other confounding explanation for the differences you may see? And then how are you going to manage that data after you collect it? How are you going to manage it? And then what are you proposing to do to analyze that data? And you should know all of that before you ever start the study, because it should match your research question and your measures. So don't think about it as, how would I look at the data? Think of it as, what is my question? What's the best way to answer that question? In whom? And how will I do it? So this is more the recipe for how am I going to get the data versus looking at the data and describing it.
Okay. I mean, I've written like a research, I don't know if it's a proposal necessarily,
Like a
but like
protocol.
all the stuff for, yeah, all the protocols and all the stuff for IRBs. And so like all the data collection procedures, all the stuff about the measurements and designing the question, like I feel like that I've done a pretty good job because I'm using similar stuff to what I've already done. I even quoted some of the other studies that we've published that have used similar methods. So I feel like all of that was pretty good. I think the problem I'm having at this point, and I don't know how much I can ask you about, but like I know what measurement I want to use and I know the variables I want to look at, and I'm still questioning whether or not I'm figuring out the right method that's in alignment with that. So like I am doing a scale. It's a measurement that is around adjustment to illness, and I'm looking at it at different time points based off of how patients are reporting their time since diagnosis, as well as how EMR states their time since diagnosis, because that's frequently different. And I think it might be interesting to look at both, because I struggled with choosing one because I spend a lot of time talking to people about the difference in what they think they were diagnosed and when the medical record says that they've been diagnosed with it. So I thought, well, why not choose both? So I'm using the two variables of time, and I'm using the variable of the adjustment to illness scale, which has been a validated, frequently administered measurement. And I have stuff about that particular. But then when I look at like, what's the method, like I'm looking for the correlation in what the adjustment to illness score is over time.
And that's the research question. The research question is, what is the correlation between electronic health record report of the time and patient report of the time?
Well, my research question, sorry, I have to get through my theoretical framework, but it's the specific aims of my study are to measure the relationship between the psychosocial adjustment to illness, which is measured by that scale, and time since diagnosis, both by electronic medical record review and patient report. And then I say the null hypothesis is that the scores will not vary across time since diagnosis.
Is it the scores don't vary across time, or the scores don't vary by method of reporting?
I think that's where I'm struggling, because I don't know if I want to measure that or if I just want to look at both.
I think you got to be really clear on what the question is.
I agree. And maybe I need to narrow it down. I'm struggling with this whole idea of defining a variable two different ways, because I feel like that makes everything much more complex. I think in the real world, it would be fun to be able to do both. And then maybe even do some type of complicated analysis around both variables. But I'm struggling with how to get that and look at that relationship, because it's like two things, because I want to see, does it change over time? And I also want to see, like, is it different patient report and so, but there's been studies about patient report and EMR review being different. So I feel like that really isn't informative, to be honest.
Yeah, and what might help you is what you have in the background of the study. So if the background of your study is about self-report compared to electronic health record, then that's your question. What are the differences?
And that's not it. Yeah, I don't really know that I want to go down that route. Like I'm really interested in adjustment to illness. That's my baby. Yeah. And so I think I need to focus more on that. So maybe what I need to do is take out one of those.
And look at what you can find in the literature to say which one is more reliable and valid, and use that one. And that
I mean, it's going to be EMR review. Like in all the studies that I found, it wasn't, but the problem that I'm struggling with is that may be more valid if you think of reality as being objective, but I'm interested in the subjective feeling of the people who are reporting this adjustment to illness. Like, it's such a subjective measurement. So then, do I want to use two subjective measurements to get that at how they feel about how long they've had the illness and how long they've adjusted with it? Or do I want to get at how we objectively say they had symptoms and they started like showing this illness at this specific time point? And that's where I keep going back and forth and was like, screw it, I'm just going to write it for both. And then now I've made myself confused.
So here's a thought. What you would probably do in the real world, because you're interested in this, is you'd have two aims. Your primary aim would be to look at how this changes over time, because that's what you're really interested in. A secondary aim could be to look at how the self-report correlates with the electronic health record. And that would be more of a methodology thing.
Yep, you're totally right. It would be.
Related
and this
to
paper isn't really looking for multiple aims.
Nope.
Yeah, okay. That's where I'm getting confused by it. I think you're exactly right. Okay.
So if this is the way you want to pursue, if you want to do something like this as you move forward with your dissertation, it's perfectly okay to add a second aim and answer that second question, which is more of a methodology question. Or after you take qual, you may want to add a qualitative aim and say, hey, I'd like to talk to these people about their experience, because I see what's in the electronic health record, but I'd like to know from their perspective what this is about. You could do it that way too. But for the purpose of this assignment, it might be cleaner and easier just to pick the primary aim and talk about that.
Okay.
But you are thinking real world, because there's no point in doing all the work of a study and not answering that secondary aim. It's very good way to approach it. It's just probably more work than you need to do for this assignment.
Well, and I live in the real world of research, so I think that's part of where I'm always thinking about what's my next study going to be.
Right.
And so I kept thinking, like, we could get 2 publications out of this too.
Yes.
And that's more real world stuff. Filter out what's real world practicality and what's the assignment too. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And this is Quant One, and not everybody works in the research world, so I'm trying to keep it pretty simplistic for those who are just first getting their feet wet. But the way you're thinking about this is very, very good in a real world setting. I would say go for both.
Okay.
And I would say, your correlation approach would be perfect for a secondary aim.
So then just using the aim of looking at time since diagnosis from EMR review and this psychosocial adjustment to illness scale score, would that be using t-test to look at the relationship between the two? I think I keep going back and forth about that.
How many time points are you going to look at in the
one?
You're going to look at one time
per person. I don't want to follow them by time and do like a longitudinal study, although ideally that would be a next step of this, something like this. But I'm just curious about, like, what I said is that we could take the variable of time and make it into a ordinal variable. I have to look at it, where it's like 0 months to 12 months. And then we do 12 months to 24 months and kind of group them together by time, so that it would have, now I'm realizing, wait a second, I think that's a ratio variable, but I think you know what I mean.
So tell me the research question that we're deciding on now, that we're talking about now.
It's whether or not, I guess, does the psychosocial adjustment to illness vary over time since diagnosis?
And you're going to measure that time.
Or vary across time since diagnosis, I think is what I mean.
Okay, so if you're going to measure how something changes over time, how are you going to only have one measure per person?
Because it would be time since diagnosis as a whole. So it would be that I capture some people when they were initially diagnosed, and I'd recruit from that population, and then I'd also capture some people who had had it for 3 years, 30
Gotcha.
years,
Gotcha.
7 years. And I'm just curious about, like, is there a pattern of how that adjustment to illness goes when you group them by all these time frames? Like, maybe everybody adjusts really badly in the beginning and then gets better, but maybe some people would just adapt poorly the whole time, or maybe they get worse over time as their illness progresses, but we just have never measured that before.
Yeah, so you're going to take a sample of people. They could be anywhere from diagnosis, and you're going to get the measure on all of them at that point.
Yep.
And then you're going to look. So there's some real weaknesses to that design, in that the way I respond to my illness might not be the same way you respond to your illness. And so we differ on a whole bunch of other variables that might be the explanation for our score, other than the time from illness.
Absolutely.
So you'll just have to address all of that in your limitations. So you'll have one time point, and people will be at different. So then what you're going to do to analyze the data is compare time from diagnosis, which is what you said. But you may want to be a little more clear on, is it going to be, are these going to be by categories, or are they going to be by months or days or years?
It's by months, and I put it as in number of months.
Okay.
And I would also, I had put in that I would use I put in that I'd use descriptive statistics to talk about the demographics so I could describe the population. But then the ordinal variable for the adjustment to illness, as well as a ratio variable of diagnosis, which could be converted to an ordinal variable for analysis similar to, with grouping of similar time points, such as 0 to 12 months, 12 to 24 months, etc. And then I'd use chi-square test to determine if there's a relationship between the psychosocial adjustment to illness score and the time since diagnosis.
Yep, that works.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
You usually want to go with the highest level of measurement that you can, and then that allows you to do parametric. But I don't think your scale allows that, does it? Your adjustment to illness scale?
No, and it's not like the numbers mean much, to be honest, except in relationship to each other. So I just didn't think that would be the right way to do it.
Yeah, the chi-square is the right way to go.
Okay, that makes me feel a lot better, because I kept thinking, but it's a ratio one. I don't want to convert it to an ordinal, but okay.
No, that works.
Okay, so then I will go through and make it more by the one definition. I think that's where I've confused myself about it too. So that's very helpful.
Yeah, and then it gets hard to write, because in reality, when you write these proposals, you write two. You write one for AIM 1 and one for AIM 2. And you don't have to do that for this assignment.
That makes sense. Should I discuss the limitations in the methods section? Is that, because I was trying to figure out, where do the limitations go? Well, it's kind of like reliable validity stuff.
Yeah. So you plan for the reliability and validity, and in that section you can just say, that you're recognizing that you have some limitations.
Okay. I think this goes back to, like, I'm talking about this as being very preliminary, because this work hasn't been done before. And so this is just my first shot in the dark. And then, and I don't think this will be what my dissertation is, but I do think, like, the study would be a shot in the dark, and then later we can refine it, but it definitely has a lot of limitations.
Yeah. Well, and it's a good start at, if nothing is known about this, it's a good place to start. before you start investing a lot of money to follow a whole bunch of people over time. You want to have some reason to believe that you need to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the only way you could really control for all those other potential variables is by looking at people, a specific group of people over time, which would be very timely, cost intensive, and everything else. So.
And it looks like somebody else has joined us. I can't tell who it might be.
I think it's Lindsay, if I can read it right.
Yeah. Hi, guys.
Hey, Lindsay.
I'm like super sick, so I'm trying to just like lie low and listen.
Okay. If you have any questions, you can join in. I think Jessica and her family's sick right now too.
Oh my gosh.
It's a bad time of semester to be getting sick.
I know. Yeah, it's awful. I have the stomach flu, so I'm just like, it's it's awful. But so I wanted to just ask a few questions. I started to get into structural equation modeling for my proposal, and I ended up just scaling it back to looking at relationships. Because despite the fact that I've looked into all the literature, I have so many questions. So I wanted to double check that was okay, because essentially there is a model I'm following that theorizes that organizational variables impact workplace incivility. And what I'm doing, there's not studies that have been done in nursing work environments. So I'm looking at relationships between the work environment and incivility, but because of the design and because it's exploratory and it's still fairly new, it's unexplored territory essentially. I'm doing like the correlational study, and I just wanted to make sure that was okay.
That is much preferred, Lindsay, because you are going to get the details of SEM or more on that in Quant 2.
Okay.
And then there's a whole summertime elective. If you end up doing your dissertation on that, you may take Paul Cook's elective, which is offered in the summer. But for the purpose of this course, it's much cleaner to start with the correlations. So that would be perfect.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I will be sure. I had addressed in like as a limit that it's like a cross-sectional study, and essentially that I can't infer causality.
Yep.
And that was like, I didn't go into too much detail, but I figured it'd be easier than trying to send you models of my thinking. So
that's
anyway,
good. That's perfect.
Okay, awesome.
And
thank you.
It's usually a first step to do or incorporated in with your modeling anyway to get the correlation. So it's a good first step.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Awesome. And then I had one last question. I went into, it was actually pretty awesome because I took the systems course with John Walton, and he's awesome. And he had us actually do a data analysis, but because of the space limit, I tried to essentially talk about like kind of what Rachel was saying is like she put in that I'll essentially clean the data and then do descriptive analysis on all the variables and then talk about like the correlation coefficients, but it's pretty concise. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Fine.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
I think those are my only questions. So
good.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Feel better.
Thank you so much. Wash your hands.
No kidding.
Right. So anyway, well, I'm going to bow out because I don't feel good, but thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And I hope you guys have a great Thanksgiving.
Yeah, you too. I hope you're well by then.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care, guys. Bye.
Bye. Rachel, do you have other questions?
I don't think so. I think that really helped me to become a lot clearer about what I need to do. So
yeah,
I appreciate it.
Yeah, sometimes it's just a lot of times I think as a doctoral student, it's narrowing it down to something manageable, and especially for these assignments, you can keep it pretty simple. So,
I think I need that reassurance because it's hard because you feel like you're at the doctorate level. It should be really complicated. And just like the assignment we just turned in, I kept overthinking it and rerunning that analysis, thinking like it's got to be harder.
Really, there's more here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I have a tendency to overthink and overanalyze things too. So, you know.
Well, feel rest assured that by the end it'll get complicated enough, right?
I actually get that feeling after looking at the next assignment. I've been beginning to think about that one. So yeah, I'll have plenty of questions for next time.
Okay. Well, good luck finishing this one up, but I think what you described is right on track. So
great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your help, Bonnie.
Yeah, no problem.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, same to you. And don't get sick.
I'm going to try not to. I'm going to wash my hands.
All right. Take care.
Bye.